processes. It's very complex because one of the things that's going on is the only reason that the state of Washington is able to license growing and selling is because the federal government, it's still federally illegal in all 50 states to have marijuana. But in the state of Washington, the U.S. Attorney has agreed to hold off on prosecuting marijuana crimes as long as the state of Washington regulates it almost as strictly as the feds would. And so that's why for the state you have to have, there's only a certain number of growers' licenses, there are strict criteria for growing, growers can't be sellers, sellers have to have licenses, and it's very strictly regulated. For us to do that here on the res, we would have to have something equivalent to what the state of Washington is doing, number one, and number two, we'd have to have an approval from the U.S. Attorney in Spokane, and we don't know how that would go either. So it's a much more complex process. Right now, all we're doing with this legalization is saying that tribal members essentially won't be charged with crimes for things that non-members wouldn't either.
So the state is of a different level of government than us, so they are able to do it and we're not? That's
We
what
are
I'm hearing.
able to do it, but it's not something we can just set up by a change of the code. In other words, when it's a little bit, it's much like federal gaming. It's also like tobacco or alcohol. We have compacts with the state of Washington that these high tax items, we can sell them on the reservation, gasoline, tobacco, alcohol, but it's because there's been a compact worked out with the state of Washington. If we were to do growing and selling marijuana, it would require the same thing. That's much more complex than just allowing people to have it. It's in the works, but it's the other thing is the state of Washington is right now passing legislation to enter into compacts like that with its tribes. But that's still in the works. Yes, sir.
How does all this relate to medical cannabis?
Well, there's nothing to change medical. At this point, my understanding is if you've got a prescription, that already gives you something of a protection. But basically anything under an ounce would be legal. And it wouldn't distinguish whether it's medical or recreational.
But if it is medical, as far as growing is considered, medical patients are allowed so many plants under the state laws.
Right.
Is this something that has to be a new proposal to the council, or
Any kind of growing would have to be a new proposal.
or is that a case-by-case basis?
Well, again, if you're talking about growing, any growing right now is illegal on the res. If you're talking about a proposal to change it, any kind of growing will require a whole new proposal, and as I say, probably some kind of agreement with the state, because it's just it's a whole different ball of wax.
So does that mean the tribe and the council doesn't recognize the medical marijuana laws of Washington?
Well, no, they're not. They're not. The laws of the state are not, in that respect, are not binding unless you're a non-Indian. But essentially, any kind of
But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, so across the river, Joe Smith, who has his medical license, can grow in his yard a certain amount of plants.
Right.
But me, because I'm a tribal member, I can't grow any number of plants in my own yard.
Not on the res.
Not on the reservation.
Not on the reservation.
So this really has nothing to do with medical marijuana at all.
No. This is
Only
about
recreational.
Well, unless if it's medical, you're talking about two different things.
I get it.
There's growing and there's possessing. If you're possessing medical marijuana and all you have is possession, that's a whole different thing from growing it. And I understand in the state of Washington under medical you can grow it, but any kind of growing is not permitted on the reservation. But again, possession. If it's,
So how is that policed or how is that regulated?
on the reservation?
Yes, is that the tribal cops gonna
Yes.
do something to the individual if they're growing marijuana?
Yeah, you would be
That's
charged.
how-
You would charge for crime if the quantity was sufficient. You could be charged federally.
And so if the individual had his medical marijuana license, where do they stand?
They'd have to use it. It isn't valid on the reservation.
It's not valid in tribal.
Not for growing. For possessing, yes. Not for growing.
Possessing, yes, but not growing.
Right. Yes.
Is that also for non-tribals to have their medical marijuana and to grow such forth if they're living on the reservation on their own land?
You mean like fee land on the reservation?
Something,
Good question.
right? If it's in their own home and they have their medical Because I know like a couple years ago when this whole started, there was somebody that lived over on our side, a non-tribal, and he thought, hey, Washington State passed it. I've got my medical card. He posted it like he's supposed to by law, and he got swarmed, and everything was torn out and torn down, and they made an example of him.
And did the tribal police or the feds?
You know what? I never asked. Not my friend.
That's an important distinction. I don't know if you've heard the case about the Kettle Falls Five, who are
No.
off the reservation, but they're being prosecuted by the feds. Basically, if a person is a non-tribal member, they are not, the tribe cannot prosecute non-members in tribal court, period. There's no criminal jurisdiction. That's been that way for 36 years.
Now, I want to clear that we can't hear non-Indian cases for felonies in our courts. We
Crimes.
but we can for civil.
Civil.
Okay, and that would be to the level of felony criminal right now.
Right. If they're growing on, right, it's essentially, whatever they can legally do in the state of Washington, they can legally do on the reservation because we have no jurisdiction to prosecute them for crimes. But if you don't have a license in the state of Washington, if you possess more than an ounce, if you are selling it without a license, if you are under the age of 21, those are still crimes in the state of Washington. If someone on the reservation is found doing that, they could be cited and charged, but they're going to be sent to Okanagan or Ferry County because those are the people who can prosecute them. Does that answer the question, that part?
So what
Don't
if
for
you,
any of us.
so if you have a tribal member who lives on the reservation, but it's not on trust land, what's the jurisdiction for that tribal member? Can they grow it?
No. That's one of the difficulties we have right now is that tribal members on the reservation at this
On
point,
land.
if it's within the reservation boundaries, I think
But a non-tribal member can.
that's correct.
So what if they're married to like a member?
Well, you said it doesn't seem right. That this legislation is an attempt to remedy that, at least as far as possession goes. As far as the growing and licensing, it's simply a more complicated process. It's not something we can just fix with a code amendment. I've lost track of who was first. Okay.
So this is just basically for our legal department to stop prosecuting tribal members. And so it's just, yeah, like making sure that we don't prosecute tribal
Well,
members. The state will do it if wrong. So it's just catching us up to the state laws.
That's essentially what this would do, is simply harmonizing with state law as far as possession goes.
So it wouldn't be as arbitrary.
Right.
Okay.
I'll let us give you the
Well, even with the state, there's 3 different parts to it, like for marijuana. There is the medical part, then the other part is you get to grow,
Right.
but you don't get to sell,
Yep.
and then there's the in-between that. So you can't do all
Processing.
3. Yeah,
Right.
that's my understanding how the licensing go.
Right.
But you just can't flat out grow it.
On the
Until the feds say, go ahead, you guys can grow on all federal land.
well,
And which that probably won't happen yet.
From so far what we've been talking about in the council, because this is just as confusing to us as it is in this audience,
Yeah.
right? And if you
Watch the hearings in the state legislature, it's as confusing over there as it is in this room right now. I mean, there's at least 12 bills in the legislature that's going through, and they're having the same kind of debates that discussions that we're having now.
Yeah.
The only one that I think is going to probably get through is, and that might not happen, is the legislature authorizing the governor to negotiate and do compacts with tribes, if tribes get into any part of the marijuana stuff.
But I'm very thankful for you guys to start looking at the legalization of it. For the reason is that it is unfair to the tribal member to get the crime and then the non not to. That's the part I do appreciate.
Yeah, and then there's still a lot of discussion because we have some people who are totally against any, and then some people that are for medical, and then some people are for just making it all legal for everything. We have quite a variety track of the different kinds of input she gets or positions taken by tribal members and those won't be compiled. But it's something that we haven't really come to a conclusion. We can't come to a conclusion on the council, and I personally can't until I really hear from a lot of our people. Because one of the things that we don't know, I'll get you honest, one of the things that we don't know, well, one of the things that we do know is right now it's against the federal law. But the Attorney General, Holder, said that he wasn't going to enforce that. He's gone. And so we're having a new lady that's going to be the Attorney General. And it don't sound like that. It looks like it, though. And in her hearings, they're talking to her, these don't sound like she's supporting of not enforcing the federal law. And God knows what's going to happen in the presidential election next year. So one of the problems that we have is, say we do get it, and a lot of money is invested by whether the individuals or the tribe, and then in next year, it's all going to be done because of the feds. And so what do we do? I mean, it's a tough, we're in a tough spot. I think that's where the state is at too. I'll give it back to you and pose the questions.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yes, you.
Okay. Well, the first thing, it's a crime under federal law. That's what you have to look at. The other part is the jurisdictional part of it. Whether it's off the reservation or on the reservation. I know with felonies, like Mel was talking about, that's handled by the federal. Because anything a felony is handled by the feds. So like the tribal policeman can't really handle things like that. And our court system doesn't handle that either. So it goes to federal. So what do you consider marijuana? Is that federal? I mean, is that felony, or is that, what kind of a crime is it supposed to be?
Well, right now, under the tribal code, it's a misdemeanor up to certain amounts. If it's beyond a certain amount, then the feds prosecute it. And that remains in
What
place.
amounts? What is your certain amount? You're saying less than so much, it's not? More than so much it is? Well, what is that amount?
I don't actually know exactly what that amount is, but I know it's far more than an ounce. Right
A
now,
little over an ounce, like 2 ounces?
what I
It's like
think,
about an ounce. I mean, feds only gonna come in and it's like
Pounds.
that's right.
bundles and bundles of, you know,
That's-
pounds. I
Well,
mean,
you come in, they come in before the
depending on the
some
circumstance.
places, because I know up in Pellet Hill, I know there was somebody that was growing it up there, and we wanted to go.
Right.
And we didn't find it out later.
And
As a matter of fact, I turned it in.
and is that been prosecuted?
Yes.
Okay.
That's been prosecuted. And since the guy had heart problems, they didn't keep him in. But they didn't want to take care of him with all his heart problems. Probably smoked too much marijuana. But anyway, with marijuana, maybe for medicinal, for things like pain issues, it's okay. Now, any kind of drug, you might think it's not good. Like I've seen this happen like in the late 60s, early 70s with, like in the colleges, the young people. And they all say it's okay. But if boy, it grows on you and it becomes more than just marijuana after a while, that's my concern. It gets into something deeper than marijuana. Not only physically, mentally, but it just kind of, I have a young man that was the age of my son. My son was born in 1962. So when they were high school, he came out from there. And he was smoking marijuana. He was smoking marijuana, and I caught him, and I sat him down and talked to him. And I talked to him about the effects, what are the effects. I said, I can see some of the effects by looking at you. it's, it's starting to look like a zombie. I mean, it's kind of, they kind of act like that as they, and then later on in life, I got a call from when my sister passed away. He called me and he told me how sorry he was, but he also said, it's probably been about 23 years ago, he said 27 years ago. He said, I wish I had listened to you. He said, when I went for marijuana, I went for something else. He said, now I just feel depressed, I go to drugs, and I feel high, and I go back the other way. He said, I just don't feel good anymore. He said, I wish I had listened to you. And I thank you for talking about this. I said, well, you need help. And about 2-3 days later, I read a paper and committed suicide. So this is what I see. I work in children's family services. I work in a lot of social fields where I see this happening to our young children. But it's not even young children. It's the parents, it's adults. And I'm against it. I'm totally against it. And I don't really want any part of it except what we're doing in the business. And I think that people think mom feeling good, something like that, and see what it's doing to the children. They might have second thoughts. I saw so many people now right now talking about people that are in their 30s, 35, and 40. That wish they had this. I talk to people like this on a regular basis, and most people doesn't know because a lot of them are teachers, a lot of them are coaches, a lot of them are counselors. It's the first letter. But I think what's it going to do to you, your children, and how it's going to affect you and everybody else.
You've been waiting patiently, I'm sorry.
I want us to know if there's a process or a way to be able to change the tribal code towards medical marijuana laws.
Yeah, it's kind of like the process.
Is it safe, does somebody have to like motion that, or do we have to go to the council individually and ask them, or what's the process of that?
Well, that's what the process we're going through with this legalization process right now. There is a provision in the code right now that says that if you legally possess, without going into detail, and my understanding is that you've got a prescription, that you're already covered as the code now stands. Now, if your issue is growing,
Well, and dispensing as well.
Well,
there's a lot of areas that have like medical dispensaries that our area really doesn't have.
right,
So that's another.
any kind of growing and dispensing, whether it's recreational or medical, that's that stuff that comes under the compacts that may or may not be coming down the pipe. And so we're not in a position yet where we can make a code amendment because that process is just not far enough along.
Is it the prosecutor's discretion if to go after the individuals who are growing or selling under the medical guise?
Well, yes and no. The prosecutor does have discretion, but his discretion isn't whether or not he likes marijuana. It's whether it's still illegal under the code and he has enough evidence. If he doesn't have enough evidence, he won't prosecute. If he does have enough evidence, he will prosecute because it is illegal.
So, but you understand what I'm saying? I mean, it's not a priority for non-Indians and on the off reservation to get, nobody's getting busted for medical marijuana. Nobody.
Well, and I can surmise, I'm not the prosecutor, my department's a little different, so I don't know exactly how they prioritize things. It would seem to be common sense that they're going to go after things that are much more threatening, but I don't exactly know how they divide up their caseload. You're saying it is within their prosecutorial discretion. This is similar, but a little different to what's going on with the U.S. Attorney. The U.S. Attorney has jurisdiction over the whole United States, and they are refraining from enforcing in those states like Washington that have a legal marijuana regime. That's a kind of prosecutorial discretion, but it's also got a certain policy they've written out, and they have, this is what started this discussion, is last December, a memo came out where they said, okay, we're not saying it's legal to do marijuana. It starts out saying marijuana is still a felony. But then they say, okay, but, you know, we've only got so many FBI agents, we've only got so much money, we've got more important things to go after. So without saying, they didn't say they're not going to enforce marijuana laws, but they kind of put a prioritization of what comes first. And so it's, all of this is very unofficial. And that's the difficulty, that's the hazard, is we could do all sorts of legalization and then the feds could pull the rug out from under us.
So we still pretty much need to be worried about being incarcerated by the tribal police if we were trying to grow medical marijuana.
If you're trying to grow it, yes. If
Well,
you
that's,
just
that's,
possess it.
that's under the medical marijuana like they allow. You know what I mean? It's in the prescription of whatever the state guidelines are. They allow.
Or you can
so
send me an
much.
email, it's on the cover page. Did you get one?
Right, the state does that, the state has no jurisdiction over the thing on the reservation.
I know, that's what I'm saying, is that,
So this is
but
just
they
for our
don't
comments.
prosecute individuals off the reservation for growing medical marijuana.
I just put
That's
one
correct,
word.
but the state
They could, but they don't, right?
I'm not sure I'm following your question.
Well, I don't know how else to put the question. I mean, I'm just pretty much asking as an individual, if I'm an individual with my medical marijuana card.
Right.
And under that card from the doctor, it says I can have 3 plants.
Right.
So I choose to grow my 3 plants.
I think I can answer your question. The doctor does not have the ability to trump tribal law.
Okay.
He's not a legislator, he's not a state, he's not a federal legislator. He can write all the prescriptions he wants. They're not valid for growing on the reservation because that's outside his jurisdiction as a doctor.
That's just a general guideline. I just use that number just as an example. But I mean, everybody's allowed a certain number. I think it's 15. And that's under the medical marijuana law of Washington.
Right, but that law is not applicable on the reservation. It's
Yeah,
still
so-
illegal to grow any amount on the reservation. And I can explain this because I was in another state where there was a joint Colorado. And people would come across the border that had a prescription and they would get busted for simple possession. And they'd say, but I have a prescription. And it was very simple. Your prescription ends at the state line. A Washington prescription for growing ends when you end on the reservation. It has no jurisdiction here. And a doctor cannot change that.
There's a,
My goodness.
there are,
It's all arbitrary. Nobody's going to get this. Restate the question.
She asked why they brought you membership before it was
Anna, what'd you say?
Rita asked why wasn't it brought to membership before it was sent out?
Hi, I guess I'm going to be another one of the unpopular ones here. I live against it because I don't have enough to convince me as an elder or whatever. I've been keeping track of Colorado for their year status, or their experimental year status or whatever. They've already had deaths in children, and the other states are going to be bringing them to court for transporting drugs across their states. Other things are bleeding out of that, making it legal, is they're doing things like putting it in inhalers so that have kids bring them to school. They're extracting the oils, I guess, or I don't know how you process it, but that extract the oils and stuff and put it into food. And that is, you think maybe you're going to put a little bit of something here on the reservation to me it's just a step to open the door. And I really don't want our reservation to be like that and have our children, because I worked at the police department for 28 and a half years, and we did a lot of eradications and a lot of drugs and stuff like that. And I know what the effects are, and I know who the growers are, and I know they're still growing. And why they're not being taken care of is beyond me. But my point is, it says back here that a lot of them were worried about the tribes losing eligibility for federal grant money. However, grant money could be brought into question if the tribes were to license and grow or distribution of marijuana on the reservation. So it's just like, to me, that's not very plain. Like it could or it could not be. And what you're standing up there telling me is that you could do this, but you can't do that. How much is that ounce? Show the people how much is the ounce that you can possess.
Do you know?
1 ounce is what you
How much
But
is an ounce?
like in a bundle, if you were looking at it, how much would it look
How much
like?
is an ounce? And how do you know that they're only...
Is it that big? It can't be that big.
On a person, and they don't have
Because, let's see.
elsewhere.
Quarter.
I know how people are. I know how
can be pretty big.
And I know what you do. And anyway, I wanted to throw that in there. I'm strictly against it.
Advocate against alcohol.
Before, I want to answer because question. Okay, I'll turn. In January, we came to an elevation meeting, and at that time, we were talking about coming out to the district meetings and proposing decriminalization, giving you guys information on decriminalizing marijuana. And as Michael was saying, that would be imposed as a fine, and that would give us a civil jurisdiction over the non-members if it so happens to be that a tribal member and a non-member got stopped in a vehicle. But then we ended up going back to council on February, we called back to council on February 18th. And at that time, the table decided to send the legalization of marijuana and approved it to be sent out for comment. So that's where we are now. And I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, it don't. It don't answer the question, in my opinion. This is because it came out for comment, doesn't mean that that's what the law is going to be. We've never approved the laws as a council, or we never approved this amendment as a law. But I was just whispering to my fellow councilman here, we will go back and be supportive of a referendum on this, so everybody will get a chance to vote. It won't just be whoever shows up at a meeting. If this place is jam-packed full of our tribal members, that's one thing. But this is still important of one in many, many ways. So whether or not we're going to be successful in getting a referendum, we're going to make a run at it. Okay? Good. Good. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Okay. And then you had it. And I hope it's a legal one so I can give this to you.
I'm part of the Omak Coalition, being a public governor here for the tribe. And I know that the Omak County Health Coalition has been doing surveys in the Omak schools and the Open Island schools, and what the kids are answering the surveys. And they're saying that 1 out of 5 10th graders have admitted to regular use of marijuana. And what you're saying in Colorado, after that was legalized, they saw a huge jump of use. And so I'm just worried for the kids here and what we'll do to help them when they get pulled over and thrown in juvie for possession of marijuana. Once it's legal, it's already with alcohol and all the other drugs. And now if we turn around and say, okay, let's go ahead and have marijuana legal. Because right now, and that's the case that are admitted, so they're saying 1 in 5, but you know, it's probably more than that.
One of the issues, and we tried to get Brooke here from housing, because HUD is under the
Federal, right? And if federal is still illegal, and this is passed, what happens to the people that live in houses is still illegal to them? And Brooke hasn't had any, answer from upstairs yet. He's going to a meeting tomorrow. Edwin's going to be going to that meeting also, because he's young and tough, and he's going to leave from here and drive over to Toledo to a big meeting about all of this with tribes and feds, so you better drive careful. Well, go ahead. Okay.
I just wanted to add to that, the banks don't handle the drug money. So Colorado, even though they're legalized, they're all on a cash basis because the banks can take their money. So when you turn around and go here and you try to get a checking account, that's, the banks aren't gonna do that either, but that's just another step too. A lot of coffee.
It's because it's there, the reason is because it's federally protected. And that's the reason why the banks don't take it, it's because it's federal.
Banks are all federally regulated, so none of them want to violate federal law, and I don't blame them. And let me just, I want to put out something, I'm not sure this is clear. Ann and I are here from ORA. We're not trying to sell this bill, we're here to give information. We are not taking a position on whether on it. But we are the ones who have the information.
Don't kill the messenger.
You know, it was, as Anna, and I just want to clarify, Anna mentioned that we were originally going to come out to the district meetings. It was a little bit of a surprise to us that this bill has come out in the form it has. And so we're here to try to provide the information. It's not final. This is not final. This is out for comment now. And so we're here to provide information, not to take any kind of position. Sir, go ahead, question.
Yeah, I know we're all concerned about the children and everything that are involved, but according to the C.B.C. and the Childhood Education and Development Surveys, they've actually seen teenage use gone down in the states that have legalized marijuana. Also, I think this is a barrier ahead in this approach by acting like it doesn't exist or not legalizing it because it's all around us. We're an island. We're surrounded by a state that it is legalized, and they're going to have to litigate this question sooner or later. And if we just do this by saying, oh, no, it's bad, like we're doing in Iowa, it's going to lead to nowhere, and that's not the way to approach. We have to really look at this issue, study it, and talk to our kids. By just saying no and saying, no, it's bad, it's the wrong approach. Because there is information out there that says it is legal.
You have
Another question tonight, I don't believe this role or how much we can have of marijuana. But I just want to be sure I understand. And we criminalize it. The only thing it's really going to do is make it not a felony if you're stopped. And that a non-member could be tried in our tribal courts, or charged, or ticketed. And that it's that simple.
Well, that would be decriminalization, but that's not this proposal. This proposal is legalization, which means there's no fine, there's nothing. If it's under an ounce and you're over 21 years of age, it's simply not a charge at all, which would be in harmony with how it is in the state of Washington right now. That may not,
Well,
that's
I'm
one
not
way.
worried about being in harmony with the state of Washington, but, anyway, I think the pros and cons of this should be put out in the Tribune and, you know, like Mel said, this isn't people who make decisions.